The soft hum of chatter enveloped the room as I entered the charity event, my heart fluttering with anticipation. The elegant venue, adorned with shimmering lights and tasteful decorations, was filled with people dressed in their finest attire. I had always believed in the power of giving back, and tonight was no exception. As I moved through the crowd, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. This event was not just about raising funds. It was about making a difference. As I navigated past clusters of acquaintances, my attention was suddenly drawn to a striking figure across the room. He was in a wheelchair, yet there was an undeniable magnetism about him. Jake. I had heard his name spoken in reverent tones by a few of the event organizers, but seeing him up close was something else entirely. His dark hair framed a face that radiated warmth and confidence. As our eyes met, I felt a spark, an electric connection that sent a rush of excitement through me. "Katie, right?" he said, his voice smooth and inviting, cutting through the ambient noise like a warm ray of sunshine. "Yes, and you must be Jake. I've heard so much about you," I replied, trying to maintain my composure as my heart raced. "You're doing amazing work here." He chuckled softly, a rich sound that made my heart flutter. "I'm just doing my part, but it's people like you who truly inspire me to keep going. What brings you here tonight?" "I believe in the cause," I said, feeling a warmth spread across my cheeks. "Helping those in need is something I'm passionate about." "I can see that. It's refreshing to meet someone who genuinely cares," he responded, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "What are your hopes for the future?" His question caught me off guard, but I appreciated the depth in his inquiry. "I want to make a meaningful impact, to help others feel seen and valued. Maybe even work in a non-profit one day." As we spoke, I found myself captivated not just by his incredible intellect but by his authenticity. We shared stories, dreams, and laughter, and it felt as if we had known each other for years. The world around us faded, and in that moment, it was just the two of us. I noticed the way he spoke with passion about his projects and the vision he had for inclusivity, and I couldn't help but admire him more. However, as the evening wore on, I felt the presence of my friends hovering nearby, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. When I caught sight of Sarah, her brow furrowed as she whispered something to Lily, who nodded in agreement. An uncomfortable knot formed in my stomach. Later, as I excused myself to grab a drink, I heard their hushed voices. "Can you believe she's talking to him?" Sarah said, her tone dripping with disdain. "He's in a wheelchair. What kind of life could she have with someone like that?" I felt a rush of indignation fill me, but I pushed it aside, refusing to let their judgments taint the beautiful evening I was having with Jake. When I returned, Jake's laughter was infectious, drawing me back into our conversation. "Have you ever thought about how people often look at appearances?" he asked, his tone thoughtful. "It's fascinating how we can let assumptions cloud our perceptions." "Absolutely," I replied, feeling a kinship with him. "It's like everyone wants to fit into a mold, but the most beautiful things in life happen outside of it." He nodded, his gaze steady on mine. "Exactly. It's about the heart, the soul. Those are the things that truly matter." As the night continued, I felt a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. I knew what my friends thought, and I could sense their judgment lurking in the background. But standing there with Jake, I felt an overwhelming desire to defy their expectations. I wanted to embrace this connection, to step outside of the box they had put me in. "Jake, I really enjoy talking to you," I said, my voice steady. "I don't care what anyone else thinks." He smiled, and in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I would follow my heart, no matter the obstacles ahead. As I sat at the kitchen table, my heart raced. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm patterns on the wooden surface, but it did little to ease the tension that hung thick in the air. My mother, Margaret, had entered the room with a look that sent a shiver down my spine. I could tell she had something serious to discuss, and I braced myself for what was to come. "Katie," she began, her voice steady yet laced with concern, "we need to talk about your upcoming wedding." She crossed her arms, a gesture I recognized all too well. It was her way of signaling that she was ready for a debate. "What about it, Mom?" I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Jake and I are happy. Isn't that what matters?" "Happy?" She scoffed, her eyebrows knitting together in disapproval. "You call this happiness? You're marrying a man in a wheelchair. Don't you see how this will affect your life? Your future?" I felt my cheeks burn with frustration. "Mom, Jake is incredible. He's smart, kind, and we share so much. His disability doesn't define him, nor does it define our relationship." Margaret rolled her eyes, exhaling sharply. "You're being naive, sweetheart. What will your friends think? What will people say? You're throwing away your chance at a normal life for what? Compassion. Compassion," I echoed, disbelief flooding my voice. "This isn't just about compassion. It's about love. Jake deserves the same chance at happiness that anyone else does." "Love is one thing, Katie, but reality is another. You have aspirations, a career to think about. Are you really willing to jeopardize that for someone who may never be able to fully participate in your world?" I took a deep breath, my pulse quickening. "You're wrong, Mom. Jake participates more than you realize. He has a brilliant mind, and he's working on projects that are going to change lives. He's already making a difference." Margaret's expression hardened. "And what if he can't provide for you? What if he needs you to care for him? You need to think about these things. You're being selfish." "Selfish?" I shot back, incredulous. "I'm not the one judging someone based on their physical abilities. You are. This is not just about me. It's about us. Jake and I have a bond that goes beyond appearances and societal expectations." "You're being foolish, darling," she said, her voice softening slightly but still tinged with disapproval. "I just want what's best for you." "Do you?" My voice cracked slightly, the weight of her judgment heavy upon my shoulders. "Or do you want me to conform to your idea of what's best? I can't live my life based on your fears and prejudices." Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. "I love Jake, and I refuse to let anyone dictate my happiness. Not even you." Silence enveloped the room. I could feel the air thickening with unresolved tension as I stood my ground. My mother's disappointment was palpable, her expression a mix of frustration and concern. I wanted to reach out to her, to make her understand how deeply I cared for Jake, but I knew that this was a battle we might not win today. "Katie," she said at last, her voice quieter, almost pleading, "just promise me you'll think about this. Think about your future." "I will think about it, Mom," I replied, my voice firm. "But I won't let your judgments cloud my heart. I stand by Jake, and I won't change my mind." With that, I turned away, unable to meet her gaze any longer. I walked to the living room and sank into the embrace of the couch, my heart still racing. The weight of my mother's words lingered in my mind, but I knew I had to be strong. Jake was worth fighting for, and I wouldn't let anyone, not even my mother, take that away from me. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Jake. "Hey, beautiful. Can't wait to see you later. Let's talk about our plans for the wedding. Love you." I couldn't help but smile as warmth spread through me. "Love you too," I typed back, feeling a sense of reassurance. No matter the judgments we faced, I had to hold on to the truth of our love. It was worth the fight. I stood in front of the mirror, my heart racing as I clutched the letter in my hand. The words on the page seemed to blur together as I replayed my mother's disapproving voice in my mind. "He has secrets, Katie. You need to be careful." The anxiety was suffocating, and I felt the weight of the world bearing down on my shoulders. I took a deep breath, determined to confront my fears head-on. "Jake," I called out, my voice slightly quivering as I stepped into the living room where he was working on his laptop. His presence instantly calmed me, and I felt a wave of warmth wash over me as I approached him. He looked up, his eyes bright and inviting. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, sensing the tension in my demeanor. "Not really," I admitted, sitting down beside him. "I received this letter today." I held it out, my hands trembling slightly. He took it from me, his brow furrowing as he read the anonymous warning about his supposed hidden secrets. "I don't want you to worry about this," he said, his voice steady. "It's just someone trying to create doubt. You know that, right?" "I know, but—" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "What if it's true? What if you have something in your past that I don't know about? Something that could change everything for us?" Jake sighed, his gaze unwavering. "Katie, I promise you, I have nothing to hide. My past is just that. My past. I've faced enough obstacles in my life. I'm not going to let someone else's judgment dictate our future." His confidence ignited a flicker of hope in my heart. "You believe in us?" I asked, my voice softening. "More than anything," he replied, reaching out to hold my hand. "We've built something beautiful together, and I'm not going to let anyone tear that down. What if my friends can't accept it? They think I'm making a huge mistake." I felt the tears pool in my eyes, the weight of their skepticism pressing heavily on me. "Then let's show them how wrong they are. Let's prove to them that our love is stronger than their judgments." His grip tightened around my hand, and I felt a surge of determination through me. How could I ever doubt him? As we sat there, the sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow around us. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and the challenges we had both faced. I learned about his passion for technology and how he wanted to create solutions for people with disabilities. The more he spoke, the more I admired him, not just for his intelligence but for his resilience. "I remember the first time I had to learn to adapt after my accident," he shared, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "I felt so lost, so isolated. But I knew I couldn't let that define me. I wanted to be more than my wheelchair." "I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been," I said softly, squeezing his hand. "But look at you now. You're incredible." "Thanks, Katie. But it's not just me. It's the people who support me, like you. You make me want to be better." His sincerity made my heart swell. The conversation shifted to our wedding plans, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. "Let's focus on the love we have," I suggested, my voice steady. "Let's not let anyone else's opinions ruin this for us. This day is about us, our commitment." "Absolutely," he replied, a smile breaking across his face. "Let's make it a day to remember, not just for us, but for everyone who chooses to celebrate with us." As we continued to plan, I felt a renewed sense of excitement bubbling within me. The doubts that had clouded my mind evaporated, replaced with hope and love. We were a team, and together we could face anything. Later that night, my friends organized a bachelorette party for me. I arrived with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. I was ready to celebrate, but I knew the undercurrents of skepticism would be present. As I walked into the venue, the laughter and chatter filled the air, but I could sense the whispers behind my back. "Are you really going through with this?" one of my friends, Sarah, asked as she approached me. Her tone was laced with concern. "Yes, I am," I replied firmly, locking eyes with her. "Jake is amazing, and I love him. That's all that matters." But what about your future? Are you sure you're not settling? She pressed, her voice low. I'm not settling. I'm choosing love. And honestly, I don't need your approval to be happy. My words hung in the air, and I could see the surprise on her face. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted from skepticism to celebration, though the doubts lingered in the background. I found myself laughing and dancing, trying to push the negativity aside. But I knew tomorrow would be a defining moment, not just for me, but for Jake too. Whatever happened, I was ready to stand by his side and embrace the love we shared, come what may. As I stood in front of the mirror, the soft light of the early morning sun illuminated the delicate lace of my wedding dress. I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. Today was the day I would marry Jake, the man who had captured my heart despite all the judgments and whispers that surrounded us. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted my veil, trying to quell the rising tide of anxiety in my chest. Are you ready, Em? My best friend, Sarah, peeked into the room, her face a mask of encouragement. It's almost time. Yeah, I think so, I replied, forcing a smile. Just a little nervous. Nervous? You're about to marry the love of your life. You should be thrilled. She stepped inside and squeezed my shoulder. Jake is amazing. Don't let anyone ruin this for you. I nodded, but my thoughts drifted back to my mother's disapproving glare during our last conversation. He's in a wheelchair, Katie. What kind of life can you have with someone like that? Her words echoed in my mind, mingling with the doubts that had been planted by my so-called friends. As I walked down the aisle today, I was determined to silence those voices in my head. The ceremony began, and as I took my first step into the aisle, I felt all eyes on me. The whispers from the guests, some sympathetic, others outright judgmental, seemed to ripple through the air. I caught a glimpse of my mother's disapproving frown and my friend's skeptical expressions. But then I saw Jake. He was at the altar, his face lighting up as our eyes met. In that moment, nothing else mattered. As I approached him, I could see the love and pride swelling in his gaze. He was more than just a man in a wheelchair. He was my partner, my confidant, and my greatest supporter. We exchanged vows, and I could feel the warmth of the love we shared wrapping around us like a protective barrier. When it was his turn to speak, Jake's voice was steady, though I could see the emotion trembling just beneath the surface. Today is not just about our love, he began, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. It's about overcoming the obstacles life throws at us. I've faced many challenges, but each one has shaped me into the person I am today. And Katie has shown me that love knows no boundaries. I glanced around the room, noting the expressions of those who had doubted us. Some looked moved, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Jake wasn't finished. I want all of you to understand that my wheelchair does not define me. It's a part of my life, yes, but it doesn't limit my dreams or ambitions. Tears pricked my eyes as I listened to him speak. His words were powerful, resonating not just with me but with the entire audience. I could see people starting to shift their perceptions, their hearts beginning to open. Love is about acceptance and understanding, Jake continued, his tone strong and unwavering. It's about standing by each other, no matter what the world thinks. And I'm grateful every day that Katie chose me. She is my rock, my inspiration. The officiant stepped forward to declare us married, and I could feel the excitement bubbling inside me. But just as Jake took a deep breath, preparing to share his final thoughts, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. With a serious expression, Jake looked around at the faces turned toward him, some still skeptical, others curious. But there's something else I need to share with you all, he said, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Something I haven't talked about before, but I believe it's time to reveal the truth. I felt my heart race. What could he possibly say that would change everything? The crowd leaned in, captivated. I glanced back at my mother, who was now gripping her chair, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Before I met Katie, I was working on something. Something that could change lives, Jake continued, his eyes locking onto mine for a brief moment before he turned back to the guests. Today, I want to share that part of my life with you. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, my breath catching in my throat. What was he about to say? I could sense the shift in energy, a collective breath held as Jake prepared to unveil a truth that would alter the course of this day forever. As I stood there, the weight of the moment heavy on my chest, I felt my heart race in anticipation of Jake's words. The crowd, once filled with whispers of skepticism and judgment, now held its breath, waiting for him to speak. I glanced at my mother, her expression a mix of disbelief and regret, and then back at Jake, who sat confidently in his wheelchair, his eyes locked onto mine. Before we go any further, Jake began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, there's something I need to share with all of you. He paused, taking a breath that seemed to echo in the silence. I'm not just a man in a wheelchair. I'm also a successful entrepreneur. The murmurs intensified, and I could see a flicker of surprise on the faces of our guests, including my friends who had questioned my choice countless times. Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. In fact, I've recently developed a groundbreaking technology that helps people with disabilities regain their independence. The shift in the room was palpable. What had started as a sea of disapproval began to transform into curiosity and admiration. I could see my mother's face pale as she processed his words, her tightly crossed arms slowly uncrossing. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I spent perfecting this, Jake admitted, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. I've poured my heart and soul into it, driven by the desire to help others like me. As he spoke, I felt a swell of pride. This was the man I loved, resilient, intelligent, and passionate about making a difference. What kind of technology? Someone called out from the back, breaking the tension. It's a mobility device that adapts to the needs of the user, providing them with more freedom and control, Jake explained, his enthusiasm infectious. We've already started trials, and the feedback has been incredible. His smile radiated confidence, and I could sense the crowd leaning in, eager to hear more. As Jake continued to elaborate on his vision, I noticed my mother's eyes darting around the room, trying to gauge the reactions of the guests. I could feel her internal struggle as she wrestled with the reality of Jake's achievements versus her preconceived notions. But just as I thought the atmosphere couldn't shift anymore, Jake took a deep breath, and I knew he had more to say. However, he said, his tone growing serious, there's another truth that needs to come to light. A hush fell over the crowd, and my heart skipped a beat. I recently discovered that someone has been actively trying to undermine my work, he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Someone who has gone to great lengths to sabotage my efforts to secure funding and support for my technology. A murmur rippled through the crowd as they sensed the gravity of his statement. My heart raced, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. That person, Jake continued, is someone I never expected. He turned his gaze toward my mother, who was now visibly shaken, her face drained of color. Margaret, he said, his voice echoing in the silence, you've tried to discredit me at every turn, motivated by your prejudice and your misguided beliefs about who I am. The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. I looked at my mother, her expression a blend of shock and shame. Jake, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Jake interrupted, his gaze unwavering. This isn't about apologies right now. It's about the truth. I felt a mix of emotions, pride for Jake's courage, but also a deep sadness for my mother, who had let her biases cloud her judgment. I've fought tooth and nail to bring my vision to life, only to have someone like you trying to tear it down, Jake continued, his voice gaining momentum. "But I won't let that stop me. I refuse to be judged by my disability or by anyone's outdated notions of what I can achieve." The guests began to stir, shifting in their seats, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging glances of disbelief. It was as if the very foundation of their judgments was being shaken. I felt a surge of hope rise within me. Maybe this was the moment we needed, the moment when the truth would shatter the prejudices that had clouded our lives. I stood there, frozen in disbelief as Jake's words hung in the air, a heavy silence enveloping the room. The wedding guests, who only moments ago had looked down upon him, now wore expressions of shock and curiosity. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me, but before I could process what was happening, Jake continued, his voice steady yet powerful. "And it's not just my work that's been undermined." The air crackled with tension as he turned his gaze towards my mother, Margaret. "Katie's mother has actively worked against me," he stated, his eyes narrowing, "sabotaging my efforts to secure funding for my technology because of her prejudices." I gasped. The words felt like daggers to my heart. How could she have done this? My mind raced back to the countless conversations we'd had. The subtle jabs, the dismissive remarks about my relationship with Jake, they were all part of a larger scheme. "Jake, please," I began, but he held up a hand, silencing me. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that I had never seen before. "I'm not asking for sympathy," he said, his voice firm. "I'm sharing this to highlight the truth. I've developed a groundbreaking technology, a device that not only improves mobility but empowers people with disabilities to reclaim their independence." The crowd shifted, murmurs circulating like a ripple through the sea of faces. I could see some of my friends shifting in their seats, their expressions changing from disdain to intrigue. "Just a few weeks ago, I was featured in a national news segment," Jake continued, his confidence radiating. "It sparked a wave of support and interest from investors who believe in my vision. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a future where everyone has a chance." My heart swelled with pride as he spoke. The man I loved wasn't just a figure in a wheelchair. He was a visionary, a leader, someone who dared to challenge the status quo. I felt my cheeks burn with a mix of emotions, anger, pride, and disbelief. "Margaret," Jake said, his voice now unyielding, "your actions have consequences. You've underestimated not just me, but the potential of countless individuals like me. And today, I stand here not only as Katie's partner but as someone who refuses to be defined by his disability." I could see my mother's face pale, her earlier bravado slipping away as the reality of her actions sank in. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering among themselves, others staring in disbelief. "Jake, Margaret stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." "But you should have," he interrupted, his tone unwavering. "You see, your prejudices blinded you to the truth. You wanted to protect your daughter, but in doing so, you almost destroyed her happiness and my dreams." The honesty in his words was piercing. I felt a rush of emotion surge through me, a mix of anger towards my mother and an overwhelming love for Jake. He had stood up not just for himself but for us, our love, our future, our dreams. As the weight of the moment settled, I took a step forward, feeling the warmth of Jake's presence beside me. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "this is who Jake is. He's not just the man in a wheelchair. He's so much more. We've fought against your judgments, and we've come out stronger. I won't let your prejudice dictate our lives anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the eyes of the audience on us, some in admiration, others in disbelief. The transformation in the room was palpable. Judgment was giving way to respect. "I hope you can learn from this," Jake said, his gaze unwavering. "I hope you can see that love knows no boundaries, and it's time to let go of the chains of prejudice." In that moment, I felt the power of our love radiate through the room. We were no longer just a couple facing ridicule. We were champions of our own story. I squeezed Jake's hand tightly, feeling the strength in his grip. I knew then that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united. As the audience began to process what they had just witnessed, a new energy filled the air. People began to applaud, a slow clap that grew louder, echoing through the church. I looked up at Jake, and in his eyes, I saw a future filled with hope, love, and resilience. Together, we had rewritten the narrative, and I knew that our love would always shine brighter than any judgment cast upon us. I hope this story has touched your heart as much as it has mine. It's amazing how true love and the courage to follow our feelings can overcome any obstacle. If this story has made you think about the barriers we often impose on ourselves or others, please leave a comment below. I really want to know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the next stories we share here. And if you like this content, check out the other stories on the channel. Each one has a powerful message for your life. May we always choose love and empathy, even in the most challenging moments. Until next time.